They say the sea never gives up its dead, but they never tell you what happens when it gives you something else entirely. I was 58 years old, captain of a floating city called the Majesty of the Seas off the coast of Florida, when my crew found it deep in a secure hold. The box was made of a dark, splinter-proof wood that didn't show up on our scanners, and the moment I laid eyes on it, a cold dread washed over me, a feeling I hadn't had in 30 years at sea. But that was nothing compared to the look on the faces of the Coast Guard specialists. When they finally saw what was inside, one of them just looked at me, his face ashen, and whispered, "Captain, that's just not possible. What would you have done?" Let me know in the comments if you would have opened it, and don't forget to subscribe and tell me what city you're watching from. My name is Elias Vance. I'm 58 years old, and for the better part of my life, the sea has been my office, my home, and my constant companion. 34 years I've sailed, the last 10 of them as captain of the Majesty of the Seas. She's not just a ship, to me. She's a meticulously crafted universe of steel and glass, a city of 5,000 souls that I guide across the blue expanse. My world is one of precision, of schedules timed to the second, of systems monitored by arrays of glowing screens. We leave the port of Miami at 1,700 hours sharp. We dock in Nassau at 0800. Every vibration of the engine, every slight shift in barometric pressure, every passenger satisfaction report, it all filters through me. I've seen rogue waves in the North Atlantic, and waters so calm in the Caribbean they looked like polished sapphire. I thought I had seen everything the ocean had to offer. I was wrong. My life was a routine, a comforting, predictable rhythm set to the hum of the ship's stabilizers and the gentle rocking of the waves. That day, the third of our 7-day Caribbean loop, began as a carbon copy of 1,000 others. The sun rose over the Great Bahama Bank, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. The sea was placid, a gentle swell that was barely perceptible on a vessel of our size. From the bridge, I watched the early risers jogging on the track below, their figures small and determined. The air smelled of salt and fresh coffee. My first officer, Jonathan Reed, a good man with a sharp mind, ran through the morning checklist with the quiet efficiency I demanded. Weather patterns were stable, engine performance was optimal, all systems green. It was, by all accounts, a perfect day at sea, the kind of day that can make a man complacent, make him believe he truly is the master of his domain. I spent the morning reviewing logistical reports and signing off on supply requisitions, the mundane paperwork that keeps a floating city running. My world was ordered, logical, and under control. The call came just after 1,400 hours, during my mid-afternoon bridge rotation. The ship was quiet, most passengers napping after lunch or lounging by the pools. The voice on my private comm line was that of my chief engineer, Thomas Miller. Thomas is a man I've known for 15 years. He's unflappable. He's the kind of man who could tell you a turbine was on fire with the same calm tone he'd use to order a sandwich, but this time his voice was different. There was a tremor in it, a note of confusion. It was a sound I'd never heard from him before, and it sent a small, cold signal to the back of my mind. "Captain," he said, his voice a little too tight. "Apologies for the direct call, but we've found something." My first thought was mechanical, a stress fracture, a leak. "What is it, Thomas? Report." I kept my own voice steady, a practiced calm that projects authority. There was a pause on the other end, just long enough to be unsettling. "It's not a ship issue, sir. We were doing a routine inventory check in Deep Storage Hold 7C. It's a box." I almost laughed. A box. He was calling me on my private line for a box. My mind immediately went to contraband. It wouldn't be the first time a crew member tried to smuggle something aboard. A piece of luggage? Unclaimed cargo? I asked, my patience already thinning. "Get security down there, document it, and we'll deal with it at the next port." "No, Captain," Thomas said, his voice dropping lower, more urgent. "You don't understand. This hold. It's mostly spare parts for the desalination units. It's been sealed since we left Miami. Nothing has gone in or out. And this box, it wasn't on the cargo manifest. It wasn't on Asterisk any manifest. It's not ours. I could hear the low thrum of the ship's machinery behind his words. The hold was deep in the ship's belly, deck after deck below the waterline. A place of cold steel, fluorescent lights, and the constant hum of power. "It's just here," he finished, sounding almost helpless. My mind, trained to solve problems, cycled through the possibilities. A logistical mistake at port? A stowaway? A very elaborate prank? Every explanation felt thin. The security protocols for our deep holds are airtight. Every item is scanned, weighed, and cataloged. Nothing gets on this ship without a digital trail. "What does it look like, Thomas?" I asked, picturing a standard shipping crate. Again, that pause. "It's wood, sir. Dark wood. And it's bound with some kind of metal. It looks old. Incredibly old." That was the word that stopped me. Old. Not damaged. Not misplaced. Old. A deep, primal instinct. A sailor's warning that I thought had been buried under years of technology and procedure stirred within me. "Sir," Thomas added, his voice barely a whisper, "there's no dust on it. It's clean. But it looks like it's been sitting in that exact spot for a century. It just doesn't make any sense." That was it, the anomaly, the single piece of data that didn't fit into the perfect, ordered puzzle of my ship. A man like Thomas Miller doesn't get spooked by a simple misplaced crate. Something was wrong. Truly wrong. I looked out at the serene, sun-drenched ocean, a picture of tranquility that suddenly felt like a lie. Deep below all this light and laughter, in the cold, mechanical heart of my ship, sat an impossibility. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I had to see it for myself. What would you have done? Would you have dismissed it as a crew matter and sent a security team? Or would your own curiosity have gotten the better of you? Let me know in the comments if you would have gone down there yourself. And don't forget to subscribe and tell me what city you're watching from, because you're going to want to hear what I found. The journey down to Hold 7C is a journey through the layers of my world. You leave the sun-drenched Lido deck, with its music and laughter, and descend, past the passenger cabins, with their clean carpets and quiet efficiency, past the crew quarters, the galleys, the laundry facilities, the roaring, steaming engine that keeps the dream of a carefree vacation alive. With every deck you descend, the air gets colder, the sounds change, the music fades, replaced by the low, resonant hum of the ship's heart. The bright, warm lighting gives way to the stark, shadowless glare of fluorescent tubes. This is the part of the ship passengers never see, the part one know as well as the lines on my own hands. It is a place of steel, order, and function, and as I rode the service elevator down with Thomas, the silence between us was heavier than the thousands of tons of water pressing against the hull just feet away. He led me through a labyrinth of narrow corridors, past massive pipes and color-coded conduits. We arrived at a heavy, pressure-sealed door marked 7C. Thomas swiped his keycard, and the door hissed open, revealing a space that was colder still. The air was dry, smelling of ozone and chilled metal. The hold was immaculate, just as I expected. Crates of spare desalination filters and pump components were stacked on reinforced shelves, each one labeled and secured. Everything was in its place, except for the one thing that wasn't. It sat in the center of the main aisle, between two towering stacks of spare parts, as if it had been placed there by a stagehand. It wasn't a box. It was a sea chest, about 3 feet long, maybe 2 feet wide. The wood was a color I'd never seen before, a black so deep it seemed to drink the harsh fluorescent light, leaving no reflection. It was bound by straps of a metal that had a dull greenish tint, like ancient bronze that had forgotten how to shine. There were no visible locks, no hinges, just intricate overlapping bands of this strange metal holding it shut. But the most unsettling thing, the detail that made the hairs on my arm stand up, was its condition. In this sterile, climate-controlled environment, a fine layer of dust coated everything: the shelves, the floor, the other crates. But this chest was clean. Perfectly, impossibly clean. It looked like it had been wiped down moments before we arrived, yet Thomas swore no one had been in this hold for weeks. It didn't look like it had been brought here. It looked like it had simply appeared. I walked a slow circle around it. My mind, my captain's mind, was racing, trying to categorize it, to fit it into a logical framework. Smuggling. It had to be. But the method was beyond me. How do you get an object of this size and apparent weight into one of the most secure areas of the ship without a single sensor being tripped, without a single camera seeing anything? I knelt down, my knees cracking in the cold silence. I ran a gloved hand over the wood. It was smooth, unnaturally so, with no splinters, no grain I could feel. It was cold to the touch, a deep, penetrating cold that felt wrong, like touching a block of ice that doesn't melt. "Get me a pry bar and a couple of your strongest men," I said to Thomas, my voice sounding too loud in the confined space. My training was taking over. Analyze, assess, act. While he was gone, I examined the metal straps. They weren't rusted. They were tarnished, yes, but there was no corrosion, no pitting, which was impossible for any metal I knew of to endure at sea for any length of time without protection. 2 burly engineers arrived, carrying a long, heavy-duty crowbar. "See if you can get a purchase on the lid," I ordered. One of them wedged the tip of the bar into a thin seam where the lid met the chest. He put his weight into it. The bar bent slightly, the steel groaning in protest. The seam didn't budge. Not a millimeter. The 2 men, both of whom could deadlift more than twice their body weight, put their full combined effort into it. Nothing. It was as if the lid and the body of the chest were carved from a single, solid block. "All right, stop," I said, a knot tightening in my stomach. "Let's try to move it. Get it to the cargo elevator." They holstered the pry bar and squared up on either side of the chest. They squatted, got a firm grip on the underside, and lifted. Or rather, they tried to. I saw the muscles in their necks and backs bulge with the strain. Their faces turned red. They grunted, heaved, and the chest did not move. It didn't even rock. It was as if it were part of the deck plates, an extension of the ship's very keel. I got down on my hands and knees and looked underneath. There were no bolts, no welds, no adhesive. It was just sitting there. But it was anchored by a force we couldn't see. My logical mind was failing, sputtering like a dying engine. This was no longer a problem of smuggling or security. This was a problem of physics. I called for our portable materials scanner, a high-frequency device we used to check for structural fatigue in the hull. When the technician arrived, I had him run a full diagnostic scan on the chest. He powered on the device, and a low hum filled the air. As he passed the sensor head over the dark wood, the readout screen, which should have given us a detailed analysis of density and composition, was just a blizzard of white noise, a mess of static and nonsensical symbols. I don't understand, Captain," the young technician stammered. "It's like it's not there, but it's also too much. The energy reading is off the charts, but there's no source. The device can't make sense of it." I stood there in the cold, humming silence of the hold, staring at this object that defied our strength, our tools, and our science. The calm, rational world of schedules and systems that I had built my life around was dissolving. In its place was a deep, primal fear, a sailor's intuition, screaming a warning I couldn't ignore. This thing, whatever it was, did not belong. It was an intrusion, an anomaly that felt fundamentally dangerous. The responsibility for the 5,000 souls sleeping and laughing and living in the decks above me settled on my shoulders like a physical weight. I couldn't handle this. This was beyond the scope of a cruise ship captain. I made a decision that I knew could very well be the end of my 34-year career. I turned to Thomas. "Lock this hold down. Post a guard. No one gets in or out without my direct authorization." Then I walked to the nearest service phone, my heart pounding a heavy, cold rhythm against my ribs, and I made a call to the United States Coast Guard. On the front of the chest, dangling from one of the green metal straps, was a single, dark, iron-like ring. It looked like a handle. It looked like it was daring you to just grab it and pull. Would you have had the courage to pull that? Let me know what you would have done in the comments. And make sure you're subscribed, because you're going to want to hear about the people who finally showed up to open it. It took less than 3 hours for the world to change. We maintained our course, a steady 22 knots toward the Bahamas, a veneer of absolute normalcy plastered over the ship's daily life. Up on the pool decks, the music played. In the dining rooms, guests debated dessert options. But 12 nautical miles off the coast of Great Inagua, a new sound cut through the gentle hum of the ship and the whisper of the wind. It started as a distant thrumming, a vibration felt more in the teeth than in the ears. It grew into the percussive, deafening beat of a Black Hawk helicopter, a dark metal insect against the impossibly blue sky, descending toward our aft helipad. My senior crew had cleared the area, citing a routine Coast Guard drill, a lie that felt thin and brittle on my tongue. I watched from the wing of the bridge as the helicopter hovered, its downdraft whipping the sea into a frenzy. A line dropped, and 4 figures descended, rappelling with a practiced fluid economy of motion that spoke of endless training. They were not the standard Coast Guard officers I was used to seeing in their bright orange gear. These men were dressed in dark gray, nondescript tactical outfits, their faces grim and unreadable. They carried cases made of a matte black polymer, equipment I'd never seen before, not in any maritime catalog or military briefing. They moved with the quiet intensity of surgeons or bomb disposal experts. The leader, a man with cold, intelligent eyes, met me at the base of the bridge. He didn't offer a handshake, he simply said, "Captain Vance, take us to it." I led them down, back into the cold heart of my ship. The 2 guards I'd posted outside Hold 7C snapped to attention. The lead specialist dismissed them with a curt nod, and they practically fled, their relief palpable. Inside, the chest sat exactly as we'd left it, a silent, dark enigma under the harsh lights. It seemed to absorb the very energy of the room, making the space feel colder, quieter. The specialists didn't speak. They moved around it, setting up their equipment with silent precision. One of them produced a device that looked like a sophisticated stud finder, running it over the surface of the wood. A tablet he was holding showed nothing but a flickering, chaotic waveform. Another set up a portable tripod with a strange-looking emitter on it, bathing the chest in a beam of faint, pulsing blue light. Nothing happened. For 2 hours, they worked. They tried a high-frequency sonic drill, its tip glowing with heat, which barely managed to scratch the dark wood before the bit shattered with a sharp crack. They attempted to use a plasma cutter, a tool that could slice through a submarine hull, but the beam seemed to bend and dissipate a few inches from the chest's surface, leaving not even a scorch mark. It was like watching modern science throw itself against a stone wall and break. All the while, I stood by the door with Thomas, my chief engineer, both of us feeling like men from a forgotten century, watching visitors from the future fail. The lead specialist, whose name I still didn't know, never lost his composure. He simply moved from one failed attempt to the next, his expression a mask of detached, analytical focus. Finally, he knelt, running a gloved hand over the greenish metal straps. His eyes narrowed in concentration. He stopped at the single, dark iron ring that dangled from the front, the one I had seen earlier. He didn't pull it. Instead, he produced a small, cylindrical tool and placed it against the pin that held the ring. A low, resonant hum filled the hold, and the pin began to glow a faint, cherry red. After a minute that felt like an hour, there was a soft click. It wasn't the sound of force, it was the sound of a lock, a very old and very complex lock, finally yielding. The specialist looked up at his team, then at me. He gripped the lid with both hands and, with a deep groan that seemed to come from the wood itself, he lifted it open. There was no sudden rush of air, no ancient dust. The inside of the chest was lined with a dark, faded velvet that looked as if it had been woven yesterday. There were no gold coins, no pirate treasure, no weapons. There were only two objects resting inside. The first was a large, leather-bound book, its cover embossed with a symbol I didn't recognize, a stylized kraken entwined with a compass rose. The leather was supple, not cracked or rotted from age and salt. The second object was an astrolabe, but unlike any I had ever seen. It was made of the same dull, greenish metal as the straps, covered in interlocking rings and symbols that were neither astronomical nor astrological. It felt alien, wrong. One of the specialists, an older man with glasses who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. He was their historian, their expert in the arcane. He carefully lifted the logbook from its velvet bed, his hands trembling slightly. He opened it. The pages were vellum, not paper, and covered in a tight, elegant script, the ink a dark, rich brown. "Incredible," the historian whispered, his voice filled with awe. "This is 17th century Spanish. The penmanship is flawless." He turned a few pages, his eyes scanning the text. "This is the ship's log of the El Viento Negro." The name hit me like a physical blow. The Black Wind. A Spanish treasure galleon that vanished without a trace in this very stretch of water in 1688. It was a ghost story, a legend sailors told, but this logbook was real. It was in my hands, on my ship. The historian's face grew pale as he read from the final entry. His voice was a hushed, trembling whisper. The date is October 12th, 1688. The captain writes, he writes of a strange, silent storm. No wind, no rain, just a black sky and a green light on the horizon. He says they brought a chest aboard from a derelict ship they found adrift, a chest that sings from the hold. He looked from the book to the box, his eyes wide with a dawning, terrifying understanding, but that wasn't the end. He swallowed hard, his finger tracing the last lines of the entry. And then he writes. His last words are, "The box knows our names." A chilling silence descended upon the hold, so profound I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. The lead specialist took the book from the historian's shaking hands. He turned the page. There was one more page, a final page, at the very end of the book. The script was the same elegant 17th century Spanish, but the ink was a deep, glossy black. It was still wet. My blood ran cold as the specialist began to translate, his own voice now strained, incredulous. It describes a room of cold steel and sterile light. It describes the low, constant hum of engines powered by a caged lightning. It mentions men in strange gray uniforms. He paused, his eyes lifting from the page to look directly at me. He looked at me, and then back at the page, and a sheen of sweat broke out on his forehead. "And it describes their captain," he whispered, his voice cracking. "A man with silver hair at his temples, and the weight of 3 decades of sea in his weary eyes. He didn't have to say my name. He didn't have to do anything but look at me, with that expression of pure, unadulterated shock. In that moment, in the cold, humming belly of my state-of-the-art vessel, time itself seemed to collapse. How could a man who died over 300 years ago write about me, standing here, right now? What would you do if you read a description of yourself in a book that shouldn't exist? Let me know in the comments how you would have reacted. And you'll want to be subscribed, because what happened next, and what they forced me to do, is a story the sea was never meant to give up. The specialist's voice hung in the cold air of the hold, an impossible echo across 3 centuries. For a long moment, nobody moved. The hum of the ship's machinery, a sound so familiar it was usually just white noise, suddenly seemed deafening, the only thing tethering us to the present. The men in gray tactical gear looked at each other, their professional masks cracking for the first time, replaced by a raw, naked disbelief that mirrored my own. The historian who had first opened the book looked like he'd seen a ghost, and perhaps he had. He was staring at me, not as a ship's captain, but as a character who had just stepped out of a cursed text. The lead specialist slowly closed the logbook, the sound of the leather cover shutting echoing like a cell door. He looked at me, his cold, analytical eyes now holding a flicker of something else. It wasn't fear. It was something closer to awe, and it was terrifying. Without another word, he turned and spoke quietly into a comms device on his wrist. His words were coded, clipped, and urgent. The entire atmosphere in the hold shifted. The scientific curiosity was gone, replaced by the grim efficiency of a containment team. They were no longer investigating a mystery. They were securing an asset, or perhaps containing a threat. They packed up their strange, failed tools and brought out new equipment from their black polymer cases. One of them produced 4 metallic discs, each the size of a dinner plate. They placed one at each corner of the sea chest. The specialist activated a remote, and the discs began to emit a low, vibrating hum, the same resonant frequency I'd heard from the tool that opened the lock. The 2 burly engineers who couldn't budge the chest an inch watched, mouths agape, as the massive object lifted silently, hovering 6 inches off the deck plates, suspended in a field of energy I couldn't see. It was no longer anchored to my ship. It had been appeased. They maneuvered the floating chest out of the hold and onto a specialized gurney. As they passed me, I looked inside the open box one last time. The ancient astrolabe gleamed faintly under the fluorescent lights, its interlocking rings seeming to shift and realign in my peripheral vision, as if charting a course through something other than stars. The velvet lining looked impossibly dark, a patch of captured night. They took everything. The chest, the logbook, the astrolabe. They even took the shattered drill bit and the metal shavings from their failed attempts to open it. They left nothing behind but the cold air and a perfect, rectangular outline on the dusty floor where the impossibility had sat. The lead specialist approached me just before they left. "Captain Vance," he said, his voice flat and devoid of any of the emotion I'd seen in his eyes moments before. "As of this moment, this event is classified under the National Security Act. You will speak of this to no one. Your crew who were present will be debriefed by my team. The official ship's log will state that you experienced a minor electrical malfunction in Hold 7C, which was contained without incident. Do you understand? It wasn't a question. It was an order, delivered with the absolute certainty of a man who had never been disobeyed." I just nodded, my own voice lost somewhere in the hollow space that had opened up in my chest. I, the captain of this vessel, the man with ultimate authority within these steel walls, had been reduced to a bystander in my own story. I was forced to disseminate the lie myself, to look my own senior officers in the eye and tell them it was a faulty transformer, to see the confusion and suspicion in their faces and know I could never give them the truth. When we docked in Miami, the normal customs and port authority agents were kept away from my gangway. 2 men in dark, impeccably tailored suits were waiting for me. They weren't aggressive, but their presence was an iron wall. They escorted me from my ship, the Majesty of the Seas, for the last time. Not with the honors of a retiring captain, but like a person of interest. They took me to a windowless room in a nondescript government building downtown. For 6 hours they asked me questions. They recorded my statement, my every recollection of the chest, from the moment Thomas called me to the moment their team arrived. They showed me satellite images and asked me to confirm my ship's exact coordinates. When they were done, a lawyer I had never met presented me with a thick stack of papers, a non-disclosure agreement that bound me to silence for the rest of my life, and a retirement package, a very, very generous retirement package. Full pension, benefits, a bonus that could buy a man a new life. It wasn't a reward, it was a price. The price for my silence. The price for my career. The price for my life as I knew it. I signed. What choice did I have? So now, I live here, in a small house on the coast of North Carolina. I can see the shipping lanes from my porch. Every Tuesday and Saturday, I watched the massive, white cruise ships, my former kingdom, glide past on the horizon. Glittering cities of light, heading for the same warm Caribbean waters. They look so perfect, so orderly, so completely in control. An illusion. I know what's out there. I know that beneath the sun loungers and the shuffleboard courts, the ocean keeps secrets that defy all our modern certainties. They took the box, they took the logbook, and they took my career. But they couldn't take the memory. They couldn't take the feeling of standing in that cold hold, reading words written with wet ink by a man who had been dust for over 300 years. Every night, I sit here, listen to the waves, and I ask myself the same question over and over. How? Was it a prophecy? Did the chest somehow show that Spanish captain a vision of the future? Or was it something else? Something that doesn't just show the future, but connects it. Tangles the timelines of a 17th century galleon and a 21st century cruise ship into a single, terrifying knot. That logbook wasn't a prediction. It felt like a memory. His memory of meeting me. And that's the question that keeps me awake, the question that I'll take to my grave. How does a man who died 3 centuries ago write, in the present tense, about the day he met you? And now I ask you, what do you think was really going on? Was it a doorway through time, a psychic echo trapped in that dark wood, or something else entirely? Something our science doesn't even have a name for yet. Let me know your theories in the comments below. I read every single one. And make sure you subscribe, because the sea has more stories, and some of them refuse to stay buried.